Life. Challenging, precious, limited. Death can rip away everything we know, everything we cared about and loved. How can I live without this person? Why can't I get out of bed or stop thinking about what could have been or should be now? Why can't I accept this? How can I stop the pain? Help is here. MedCircle's course on grief, Beyond Bereavement, follows a 6-step framework towards transformative healing. You'll receive expert advice and learn science-backed techniques to help you process this grief and live more fully. You'll be provided with actionable steps and supportive resources. You'll also have live access to some of the best minds in mental health, the MedCircle doctors. And perhaps most importantly, you'll join a supportive community of like-minded individuals who are all going through something similar. Breathe again, find joy again, live again. Visit MedCircle.com to start your healing journey today. And as you just saw, that means MedCircle's course, Beyond Bereavement, our course all about grief and how to get through loss, is now available. You can use the links below this video. I say now available. It's actually not available until tomorrow, but most people will be watching this live stream as a recorded video. On August 30th, it will be available. And if you want to learn more about that course right now, check the link below the video. Welcome to this live stream. My name is Kyle Kittleson, the host here at MedCircle. And over the next hour or so, we're going to dive into the topic of grief and show you inside clips, sneak peeks of the Beyond Bereavement course, as well as clips from previous workshops and seminars that we've held with our incredible MedCircle doctors. In the first part of this, we are going to talk about how you get through grief. Okay, we're going to make it all about you for once. In the second part, we're going to talk about how you can help someone else get through grief. Oh my gosh. As someone who has grieved, which is not unique, we've all grieved, and we will all likely grieve again. But as someone who has grieved, isn't it the truth that some people just don't know how to act around someone who's grieving? I mean, they just don't know. I remember I was 16, a real quick side story. My mom dies, okay? I'm in my last class. I'm taking finals. I get a phone call from my dad. My dad goes, "She died." I go, "Okay." I don't know if I said okay, but let's just say I said okay. I tell this girl, she's like, "What's wrong?" I tell this girl, I go, "My mom died." And she giggles. She like laughs and giggles. And granted, she was probably uncomfortable, and so it's just what came out. But it was the last thing that I needed to hear from anybody was laughter in the moment of taking on this immense amount of grief. Anyway, part 2 is going to be don't giggle. Here's what you do instead. And then finally, part 3, to end everything and round it off, we're going to really dive into strategies and tips on how to help you rebuild after loss. And we are going to share some profound stories of healing. The Beyond Bereavement course is led by the incredible instructor, triple board certified forensic and neuropsychologist, Dr. Judy Ho. Dr. Judy has been on MedCircle for many years and is very well versed in the experience of grief, both personally and professionally. And she's helped many, many clients over the years move through that process to feel better than ever. So we'll be hearing a lot from Dr. Judy during this live stream. I'd like to say hello to some of our live viewers who are here. A lot of you already are sharing whatever loss or grief you're experiencing in your life. I know it's sad, but I am happy to hear this. It is nice to hear that you're sharing this. I personally have so much relief when I share. And that's one reason we have a community built into the course. So if you are one of the people who sign up for MedCircle's Beyond Bereavement course, you will get access to a private community of people who are also going through grief. And, it is nice to be around people who get it. It's nice. There's nothing more uncomfortable for me than grieving and then being around somebody who's not grieving. They're like, "Oh my gosh, work was terrible today." I go, "Work was terrible. I'm in the middle of my grief. I don't care about your work." So you really dig into a relevant, supportive community who gets it. And I will say, of course, I'm biased, but I will say the MedCircle community, and I'm not talking about here on YouTube, although there is crossover, but I'm talking about our community at medcircle.com, our MedCircle members. They're going to say they're smarter than the average bear. These are people who are really educated on psychology and their own mental health. And so it makes for a much more valuable community. That being said, if you're watching this alone, this might be a great thing to watch with somebody or share with somebody who could use a little insight, a little clarity, maybe a little pick-me-up. I hope that this will be an inspiring, motivating, and hopeful hour with all of us together. That being said, let's move to our first part. You're going to see some clips from workshops and inside the MedCircle course, all about how to manage your grief. We're going to talk about the signs of grief becoming clinical depression. We'll go through the 5 stages of grief and how you can spot which stage you're in. We'll also talk about your new normal versus being in that really stuck state of grief. How do you tell the difference between that? What's my new normal and what is me still grieving? We'll answer that question. And grief can hurt. Grief can be stressful. Grief, in fact, I would say the very nature of grief for me is very stressful. Well, there are self-help strategies to help you work through that grief and manage some of that stress. We'll go to those clips right now, and I will be responding to your comments while those clips play. Wade, why don't we take it away? So I suffer this event in my life. I lose my family in a car accident, and I'm devastated, and I am feeling depressed. I feel hopeless. I don't want to get out of bed. I don't want to eat. I'm not taking care of myself. Those are all signs of depression. But because we can pinpoint it to an event and say, I very much understand why I feel this way. Mm-hmm. I lost somebody, or my family died in this tragic car accident. Mm-hmm. It is not clinical depression until those signs last X amount of weeks.
Mm-hmm. Or okay. They transform. So they last an X amount of weeks, they become more persistent. At the same time, you're starting to develop other symptoms that would qualify as major depressive disorder, like you start to feel low self-worth, for example, or you just completely lose interest in all activities in life. You just don't care about things that you used to love, and it goes on for much longer. And sometimes people will actually lose hopelessness to the point where they develop suicidal ideation. And so when things get more severe and serious and persistent, that's when we have to consider, is there a major depressive disorder here on top of the normal process of grief? I don't know if there's, a really one defined way to work through it. But I think that sometimes if you use a lot of avoidance coping strategies, like I'm just not going to think about it, I'm going to put it out of my mind, it actually leads the symptoms to persist much longer. And so if you're willing to just kind of sit with that distress and again, recognize that it's a normal process, which I think is what's hard for people when they feel like, uh-oh, something's wrong with me. Maybe I shouldn't think about it anymore. I need to avoid thinking about it. Ironically, that actually makes the symptoms drag on. Whereas if you're just willing to sit with the distress, tolerate it, and know that it's normal to feel that way after you lose somebody, you actually would work through it faster. Yeah. Part of working through it is just confronting your emotions and not being afraid of it. I've had patients come to being like super depressed after 10 years of losing their son. They kind of lived what seemed like a pretty normal existence until then, and all of a sudden 10 years later it hit them. Wow, like I have not dealt with the loss of my son. Yeah.
So from a personal standpoint, my mother died when I was 16. I'm 33 years old. I don't have a picture of her up in my house. I don't have a picture of her on my phone. If right now you wanted to see a picture of her, I couldn't do that, because the idea of seeing a picture of her puts me in that state of depression. Like,
Yeah.
I think that stage of depression of, man, this really sucks for me.
Yeah.
Does that mean I haven't dealt with it?
I don't think it necessarily means that you haven't dealt with it, although I think if the emotions are still so raw in a way that having a photo of her would be inciting to you, it probably means that there's still some emotions there that you haven't fully confronted. It doesn't mean that you haven't dealt with it at all, but it just means that maybe there are some emotions that you have been afraid of, that you've been putting off. And it makes sense because you're like, this is what I need to do to like live my life and carry on every day. And so again, that's not even a wrong way to grieve either. Everybody has to sort of have their sort of boundaries around grief also. And you still have to get up, you still have to go to work, you still have to do stuff, right? And if you know that having the photo around is going to impede with that, that's why you do it. It's not even a negative coping strategy, so to speak, but it may mean though that there might be some emotions in there that you just haven't allowed yourself to feel because it's still very, very crucial and very important to you, this phase of your life. And losing your mom at 16, I mean, that's really tough.
Yeah.
Again, because you weren't even an adult yet.
Right. Can you ever be in one of the timelines too long?
I don't think that you can be in a specific timeline for too long per se, as long as it doesn't start impacting your life in a super negative way, right? If that denial is so bad that your friends and family are angry with you, that you're still in denial, that you isolate, that you don't talk to people, then I think it can be a problem. And certainly if you're in that depression stage for too long and the symptoms morph into a major depressive disorder and you're not addressing it and treating it, then that could be a problem too.
But are there things that could happen or symptoms that people could be experiencing that aren't healthy and they shouldn't be? Like, this is not normal and you need to seek help immediately?
Well, oftentimes people will look to avoidance strategies, and a little bit of it is okay. I think that is even normal and expected, like trying to sleep as a way to take a break from those feelings, probably in more damaging ways, really relying on alcohol or drugs possibly to numb that pain. So I think when those things become more persistent, or you notice that like your drinking has just gotten so much worse, using more and more every day, then that's something that you might look for professional support with. When people start to feel like they don't care about their own lives and perhaps they even want to hurt themselves or kill themselves, take their own lives, that obviously is a huge point of concern that they need to get professional help with. And I think if you just can't carry on your activities of daily living anymore, you know, you stop showering, you don't want to get dressed, you don't want to get out of bed, you can't do daily chores, you can't go to work, that again is another sign when this is more severe. You might need to get some more help.
For people who go through all those stages and then start to live their new normal, a life without that person or without that job or without that pet, how do they know they've reached that new normal? What does that feel like?
Well, I think the new normal will always be that you miss the person from time to time. You're going to go about your tasks of daily living, and places in which or times in which you would have been doing something with that person, you're going to think about them. But I know a lot of people who, for them, their new normal is that they just reflect on those rituals, those times a little bit more. So they're a little bit more contemplative when they get to that part of the day. Oh, this is when I used to have coffee with my husband. And they just develop a new routine. They might have coffee with a friend. They may still keep it to themselves, but during that time they read. And it's sort of this idea of having a transformative stage of like what you do in your daily life without that person, but it's not always riddled with sadness. You find new ways of meaning to infuse into those moments of your life.
A lot of people feel guilty when they do that.
Yeah, yes, people do go through that.
I'm getting on with my life without this thing or this person. That survivor's guilt.
Yeah, the whole survivor's guilt. And that's a big deal here. And I think individuals, you know, who deal with that, you know, sometimes what I advise them to do is, you know, try to put yourself in your loved one's shoes. Like, would they want you to be crying every single day when you're having coffee? Or would they want you to keep enjoying the ritual and just remember that they were there with you at one time, you know, and trying to like put them into the other person's shoes. You know, I think sometimes it's hard. We lose sight of that. And again, the why me, how come I survived, but they didn't.
Or what could I have done better to keep, because this isn't just loss of a person. It can be, what could I have done to keep my pet healthier or more safe? Or what could I have done to
kept that job just a little bit longer or stayed in
Right.
that city or whatever that is.
Right, exactly. And I think you, again, have to let go of that control because it's all control. Asking those questions of why. It's because you can't understand it and you need to, but maybe
good.
you don't need to.
So good. That was the first question in the first session of this. Why did this happen?
Why?
That is
Yeah.
all coming from a space of control.
Yeah.
And we have to be aware of why we're asking ourselves these questions. Is it coming from a space of grief, bereavement, going through the stages, normal, healthy coping? Or is it coming from a space of unrealistic control that you'll never have?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And this leads to a dead end.
Right.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that people have to sort of, again, like try their best to let go of that notion that they have to understand everything, that they have to control how their grief is going. It's just going to happen the way it's going to happen. And you do have to accept or surrender to the fact that you won't know exactly what turn it's going to take.
Yeah. What are some mindfulness strategies that people can use to find the strength to work through that grief?
Ooh, one thing at a time. I think that that's probably the best advice I can give to somebody who's like, when will this end? I feel miserable. I don't want to live without this person. It's horrible. One thing at a time. What's the next thing you have to do? Don't think about the next day. Don't think about all the way down the road, how you might feel, all the big projects that are due at the end of the month. What do you have to do right now? Like, do you just have to put some dishes away? Do you just have to get dressed next? Like, take it one step at a time. And that's really what mindfulness is. It's paying attention to the thing that you're doing right now.
But when I'm in the middle of my grief, I can't even think about putting the dishes away.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even stop thinking about this terrible thing that's happened. So what do you tell those people?
Well, I think one thing that makes that worse is isolation. So if you're by yourself, especially if you're by yourself, it's going to be hard for you to carry on with your day. And so I think this is when it's really important to engage with the people that you trust and you love and basically tell them it would be really great if you could come over for a couple hours. I don't know if I feel like going out. I'm not up to that. But can you come over and just be with me for a couple hours? And sometimes when the person is there, then they'll want to kind of go about doing some of the things that they were going to do but couldn't bring themselves to do, like grocery shopping. It just seems like such a big task when you're in the middle of grief.
Yeah.
But if somebody's there and they say, okay, well, I'm here to pick you up, let's go to the store together, it helps. It eases that pain and it eases that sort of challenge of that task, right? And people sometimes really find a lot of value with support groups. Again, people who have gone through what you're going through, and you can have a community. So there are online grief communities as well as local grief communities that you can go to in person. And I know some people who have made some really lasting friendships out of those moments.
That again was triple board certified forensic and neuropsychologist speaking about grief in our series on the topic, Beyond Bereavement. Really great commenting and sharing in the comment section here on YouTube. Somebody was asking, I have already missed the comment. Oh, here it is. Lynn said, anyone experience thinking they saw their loved one who passed and had an immediate uncontrollable emotional reaction? And I haven't had that experience where I think I've seen my mother who died when I was 16. But let me tell you this, my mother and I are identical. And there are moments where I catch my reflection in the mirror and I get taken aback. I don't have an uncontrollable reaction, but I have this like step back, this jolt where I go, whoa, because I just see her in the mirror rather than seeing my own reflection. And because we look so similar, oftentimes when I talk with family friends and people who knew my mother for longer than I did, they'll just be staring at me and I'll look at them like, why are you staring at me? And they'll go, God, all I see is Janice. All I see is, your mom. And so I think on a lesser level, we all have those heart-wrenching reminders, whether they come in the form of seeing somebody who looks similar or seeing something that reminds us of that person. Those reminders can be heart-wrenching, and the thoughts and the emotions that come out are hard to deal with, okay? For me, they're really hard to deal with. I'm sure some people out there go, no, I deal with it great. Good for you. I don't know if I deal with it great. I deal with it the best I can, and it's good enough, but it's hard. And one of the things that I've learned in my 6 years at MedCircle, one of the many things, is our thoughts, our emotions, and our behaviors are all connected. This is the basis of cognitive behavioral therapy. Our thoughts, our behaviors, and our emotions are all connected. And they all impact one another. And if we know that, for me, it does give me back some control. It makes me feel like I'm in control. So even if I'm having this thought or this emotion that seems overwhelming, I know that my behavior can be anything I want it to be. I get to choose that. I don't really get to choose how I feel. I don't get to, I know people are like, choose happiness. I kind of roll my eyes at that, because what if you don't feel happy? What if you're just not happy? Someone just died. You're not happy. Don't tell me to choose happiness. So I can't control that, but I can control what I do with it. And there are exercises to bring us closer to our emotions and our thoughts and our behavior. And I want to share this one. It's called the TIPP activity, TIPP. You're going to see what this is. It's included in our Beyond Bereavement course. Again, you can learn more about that course in the link below the video. But right now, check out this TIPP activity.
Feelings are adaptive. They are biologically necessary for us to survive and to thrive. Without our emotions, we wouldn't know if something we're doing is rewarding, is going to help us, or something is going to hurt us. These emotions all serve a purpose. And so the next time you try to, suppress a negative emotion, push it away, berate yourself for having it, just know that every emotion serves a function, and it'd be really helpful to start taking a more curious mindset towards the experience of your emotions.
That is the magic word for me, curious. Because we, just like our thoughts, judge our emotions. If we are feeling emotions we don't want to be feeling, we push them away. There's no curiosity behind why you might be feeling that way in the first place. And when I learn to approach my thoughts, my emotions, my feelings, even my behavior from a space of curiosity, it allows me to look at it without judgment. So I love that you put the word curious in there. I think that is the power word when we start to look at our emotions, is let's not be judgmental with them. Let's just show up with a healthy level of curiosity. When we talk about our emotions, we often hear, well, we need to regulate them. We got to have emotional regulation. What is emotional regulation?
Emotion regulation is essentially having agency over your emotional processing. Doesn't mean that you necessarily can control the emotion before it expresses itself in the first place. That's usually quite reactionary. But once you notice that first emotion, what do you do about it? How can you manage it? How can you understand it? And how can you make it work for you? Even negative emotions can work for you. Remember, negative emotions are there because it's helping you to survive. So if you ignore them, you're going to ignore something really important about yourself. You have an emotion because your body and your mind are screaming to you, I have a message for you. So if you ignore that message, it's not going to serve you in the end.
Yeah. And I find that your body and mind may start as a whisper, which is really easy to ignore.
Right.
And then it starts talking loudly, and you can still ignore that. And then it hits you across the face and goes, if you don't listen to me, I'm going to take over. And then you go, okay, there's something here I need to address. This emotion is giving me this information, and I've got to take it, and I've got to at least acknowledge it. That's my 2 cents. You can disagree, Dr. Judy. It won't hurt my feelings.
No, I agree with that. And I think that that's what happens when you ignore emotions for too long or suppress them for too long, then they'll explode because it hasn't gotten the message across yet. Once it gets the message across, it actually dissipates or it lessens, right? It's not going to be so intense. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like an annoying telemarketer. If you just pick up the phone and go, please don't call me, sometimes they go, okay, I won't call you.
Yeah.
Let's get into some techniques on how we can develop better emotional regulation. And these techniques are from dialectic behavioral therapy, DBT. There's a great series for MedCircle members featuring Dr. Judy on DBT and how we can leverage the techniques there. But Dr. Judy, I know you're going to walk us through some techniques right now. What's our first one?
Well, my very first exercise or set of exercises actually when you're in a very stressful place is something that can be summed with the acronym TIPP, T-I-P-P, so double P at the end. T stands for temperature, I stands for intense exercise, the first P stands for paced breathing, and the last P stands for progressive muscle relaxation. T stands for temperature, so lowering your body temperature, literally splashing yourself with some cold water, stepping outside if you live in an area where the outside temperature is a bit on the cooler side, putting an ice cube on your neck or on your cheek, on your face, just rapidly changing the temperature because that helps to lower your heart rate and takes you out of that fight or flight. I stands for intense exercise. So that doesn't mean you're going to go for a 5K run, but it does mean, maybe just doing 20 jumping jacks over the course of the next 60 seconds, or just stretching your body, doing some kind of body movement that can also help to get rid of stress hormones such as cortisol. The first P stands for paced breathing. So just like we talked about, doing a few deep breaths. My favorite is the box breathing exercise where you breathe in and you can draw a line vertically on one side of your face. Breathe in for 4, and then you hold for 4 as you draw a line across the top of your forehead, kind of in that area, and then you breathe out for 4 while you draw a corresponding line vertically down the other side of your face, and then to complete the box, you hold for another 4 counts. So that's called box breathing. You can do 5 to 10 of those. That's going to help a lot. And then the last one is progressive muscle relaxation. So in a pinch, you can just do a quick body scan, notice anywhere where you're especially tense, and then you're actually going to tense that area more for 5 seconds and then let it all go and repeat that a couple of times for every single part of your body that you notice tension in.
I think TIPP would be really great for kids as well, but is there any other way we can help kids deal with those big feelings? I mean, I know for my 6-year-old nephew, when he's in the feeling, it's almost like, okay, I just got to let him process this before I even talk to him or try to communicate with him because it's so overwhelming for him. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think first is just teaching kids to identify emotions, like just name them. And there's a lot of different tools for this. You can show them pictures of emotions. You can show them you can give them a list of words that they can look at. You can give them multiple choice, but essentially get them used to identifying emotions and removing the judgment from it, right? Whatever that emotion is, whether it's a positive or a negative emotion, all of that's fine, showing your kids acceptance, but also even asking them, try to connect those dots and say, well, what does this emotion make you want to do? What does this emotion drive you to want to do? Do you want to run around? Do you want to punch a pillow? Do you want to scream at somebody? Do you want to relax on a hammock? What is this emotion telling you to do next? And then I think the next step after that, especially for older kids, is to say, okay, well, is that emotion urge helpful or productive in this particular moment? And sometimes it's not, right? Yeah, I want to scream and run around, but whoops, we're in a school. That might not be the best time to do this. So what can you do instead to allow that emotion space to process itself, but maybe still fitting with the context and still fitting in the environment that you're in?
On What's Working, the MedCircle produced wellness show, I interviewed a woman named Dana, just a phenomenal woman. She was living in this constant suicide ideation, and she really recovered through giving back to her community. It's a beautiful story. But I asked her if there's one thing that you wish everybody would know when it came to their mental wellness and their mental health, what would it be? And she said, that you're going to recover.
Yeah.
I go, I had never heard that one.
Yeah.
That you will recover.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important to understand that for these people dealing with this incredible loss, it will feel like that you will never be in a recovered space.
Yep.
But you will.
But you will.
But you will if you just keep at it. Maybe you got a bad therapist, you need to get rid of that therapist. Maybe your wellness routine needs to be adjusted here and there.
Right.
Maybe you got to sit in that space of depression or that stage of depression for 6 months, a year, whatever it is. But recovery is on the other side of that.
It is. It is. Yeah, and it's a great reminder that it doesn't have to be forever. It feels like horrible when you're going through it, but over time, things lessen, they change. And
when you put in the work,
you've got to put in the work. And I can't tell you exactly when it'll change for you,
right.
But for most people, it's a very visceral feeling like, I feel lighter. I do feel better today. I think this is the beginning of a new chapter, right? And it's not that well defined. It's just your own personal experience that you are getting better.
What if it feels like the depression just is not going away? And I mean, I'm talking 2, 3, 4 years later. You just feel like, am I gonna be depressed forever now?
And you're not, because everybody gets better from depression at one point or another. And in fact, a lot of people will recover from depression even without treatment. That's an amazing finding that I found out when I was doing research as a grad student, that people recover from depression sometimes even without professional intervention. But it just takes longer. It takes a lot longer.
Right.
If you haven't recovered after 2, 3, 4 years, then did you go to professional intervention yet? I hope so. But if not, then go. And if your professional intervention isn't working, switch providers, switch medications, switch modalities. You know, maybe cognitive behavioral therapy isn't working for you. Try a different one. Is your self-care really in place? You know, the things that you can control. Exercise, healthy eating habits, good sleep hygiene. Are you getting out and seeing your friends? Do you have a space for community? And this is when I think it's really helpful to also visit with your values. What do you want your life to stand for? People always think that goals is what really feeds the soul. It's not, it's your values. So values are not things that you can check off.
And what's that card game that you can play to learn
values
your values?
card sort?
Values card sort?
Yeah.
Yeah, explain that for people.
The values card sort's really cool. I love the values card sort. Basically, you put the most common values on different cards, and actually you can download them everywhere on the website. You can just type in values card sort, a bunch of different kind of handouts will come up. And you sort the ones that are the most important to you in this configuration. Looks a little bit like you're playing solitaire. And with your top values, you then look at that and assess how much are you living by these values on a day-to-day basis? What did you do to honor that value of honesty, that value of adventure, that value of integrity, that value of knowledge, etc.? And that's where you can actually start to shape what your life is going to be about and what your day is going to be about. Well, if I haven't done anything to nurture honesty or community today, what can I still do with the time that I have left?
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't have to be these huge, big, grand sweeping things. Something that honors your value of community could just be picking up the phone and calling somebody you care about. And that's it.
When I was 16, my mom died, and I had no idea where to turn. I didn't even know how I was going to recover from this event that was, and probably still is, the most devastating event I've ever experienced. Losing someone so significant can turn your life upside down. And at MedCircle, we know grief is one of the hardest events we'll ever experience. And we didn't want you to be struggling to find relief or the right resources. So we created this grief course called Beyond Bereavement. And Beyond Bereavement guides you through how to process your loss and live again with joy, resilience, and purpose. Join us with triple board certified forensic and neuropsychologist, Dr. Judy Ho, as she helps us move through our grief with educational lessons in our proven healing framework, actionable and effective therapeutic techniques, weekly live access to our doctors, a digital workbook to accelerate your healing, and perhaps most importantly, a supportive community all going through the same thing you are. Build your strength back up again, find your joy again, and live your life with new meaning sooner rather than later. MedCircle is here for you every step of the way.
Thank you all for being here as we talk about grief. The chat is so nice to see all of you and hear your stories and read the support that you're offering one another. I really love that. If you've not done so, would you like this video? Would you click the thumbs up button? It'd make me a little happier. Not that that's a good reason for you to do it, but I'm just telling you, it would make me a little happier. Happier because I want this video to reach as many people as possible, and we all know how the algorithm works. So I appreciate your support as we continue on in this conversation about grief. one thing about the course is that it does follow a 6-step process. A lot of courses, they just dump you in the course and then you're going to this video or this segment or this module or this section, and there's no step framework. This is a progressive framework that's designed to help you feel better sooner and help you heal faster. These 6 steps was designed by MedCircle in conjunction with the MedCircle doctors so that we can really address all of the bereavement and grief that you're experiencing from the beginning and through the end. The last step, step number 6, is titled Thrive. And that's really where I want you to end up at the end of this course. I want you thriving. I want you to feel better and feel excited and feel optimistic about your life, because your life is still going on. You're still here. And if we're here, we might as well feel a little better about it. That's what I think, at least. We have a little message from Dr. Judy regarding the course, so I'd love to play that for you right now. I think that's where we're going. Isn't that right, Wade?
Hi everyone, welcome to our Beyond Bereavement course. I'm so glad that you're here to join Kyle and I and the rest of the MedCircle community. We are here for you, and we know that this is a challenging and difficult time. I've been there, everybody's been there. We've all lost somebody or some people who are really important to us in our lives, and I do understand how you're feeling, at least to a point. And I'm here to guide you through the process and to show you that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Through this course, you're going to be doing a variety of self-discovery activities. You're going to learn really helpful techniques to cope with these different phases of grieving that you might be in. And you're also going to learn how to find meaning, purpose, and joy in your life again. And I think it's also important to recognize that it's okay to take this at your own pace. There's going to be some points where you're going to say, I need a little break, or maybe I want to come back to this section of the course because I really want to be able to practice it and understand it well. Do it at your own pace. Please don't feel rushed to get through the process. Try to enjoy and embrace the process as much as you can. And again, myself, Kyle, and the rest of the MedCircle community will be here to help you through the process. And in addition to going through the 6 steps of this course, you're going to be meeting a wonderful community of people. We're going through something similar as you. They're all dealing with grief and loss on their own accord, and they're going to be here to share their experiences with you also.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you all who just gave this video a thumbs up. I appreciate that. We jumped up. Really, really appreciate the support. More than half of you went and press that like button. So I'm telling each of you right now, thank you so much for that support. Part of the grief process is helping others through it. How do we show up for our friends and family who are grieving? I have a friend, and I will say that this person's a new friend, and they came over to dinner one night, and this was maybe a month, 2 months ago. And their brother had gone in to the hospital for a severe headache and came out of the hospital with a brain tumor diagnosis that was very bleak. And you could tell, of course, how caught off guard she was to get this news. It had just happened that day, how scared she was, nervous she was, and how uncertain she was of the future. And I really let her take the lead in how she wanted to be cared for, how she wanted to be listened to. And in that moment, somebody else at that dinner took a different approach and moved to pure optimism. Everything will be okay. They have surgeries for this. I know somebody who survived this. Just optimism, optimism, optimism. And while it's well intended, I don't believe this person was trying to hurt the person grieving, of course. It's well intended. Is that really what you want to hear when you just heard that your brother got a brain tumor? that everything's going to be okay. Everything's not okay. Did you literally just hear what I told you? I was getting angry on her behalf. And so when it comes to supporting those that are grieving, an education is very helpful. And so in this second part of this live video, we're going to share some video clips, both from workshops and courses that help people help others grieve. So we'll talk about your role as a supporter to someone grieving, what not to do when supporting someone through grief. We'll help you spot the signs of depression versus grief without isolating your loved one. We'll go through 9 ways to help your loved one through grief, both in the short term and the long term. We'll also talk about what the conversation looks like when you're trying to get your loved one to consider or seek out professional help. And I would say this last one, perhaps most importantly, is as the supporter, how do you take care of yourself and avoid burnout? 2 years ago, my dad had a accident and he was in the hospital. And for a while, things were not looking too hot. And I called my best friend, or maybe he called me, and I told him, I said, I need you to take care of you because I'm going to need you for a lot longer than I thought to help me get through this. And because I knew the support I needed, but I needed so much support that I needed my caregiver to also have support. You know what I mean? So when they say it takes a village, goodness, is that not true? The village is everything. So as someone who's part of that village, take a look at these tips, tricks, and insights on helping someone through the grief process.
And so this idea of, you know what, they just went through this big deal. I'm just gonna give them some time.
No.
You're saying don't do that, reach out.
Yeah, reach out. And they'll let you know if they want to see you, if they want something in that moment or not.
When a big question that supporters get from someone who's suffering is, what could I have done differently to keep this from happening? What could I have done better? Why did this happen to me? They come to the supporter with all these questions that are almost impossible to answer.
Right.
What does a supporter do?
I think the best thing a supporter can do is not try to answer those questions because you won't know the answer. Nobody does. Mm-hmm. And so it's more just saying, you know, understanding and empathizing why they would want to ask that question. Like, I totally get it. You know, this is really confusing and this is totally a surprise. And I understand why you're struggling with that. Just empathize with them about the experience and not so much try to answer their questions or try to solve the problem because it's really not a solvable problem.
Dr. Ho, what are some common things that supporters do that they hope are helpful but are actually unhelpful?
I think sometimes putting standards on where they should be in their grief. Like, come on, you should be getting out of bed. You should be doing this. Yeah, I think that anything that involves the word should is tough for people who are grieving because then they already feel guilty, they already feel bad, and you're guilting them further. You're making them feel worse about, wow, maybe I should be better if they're saying that, right? And you're a trusted person. You're a loved one of the person who is grieving. And so if you're saying, hey, you should already be doing this, then they might take that to heart. They care about your opinions. So I think that that's one thing that I see oftentimes that people are doing, of course, with good intention, but it actually makes a person feel really judged and like they should be somewhere along the path of grief already.
I have one that I really dislike.
Which one is that?
It's when they come from a good place of wanting to empathize, but they do it in a way where they just talk about their own similar grief situation.
Yeah.
So where they say, oh, my dog just died. And then they go, oh, well, when I was a kid, I lost my dog, Charlie. And I don't want to hear about your dog, Charlie. My dog just died, and I'm trying to get somebody to listen, and now I have to be a supporter for something that happened to you 15 years ago. That's a personal thing, but I think it's something that I've taken with me as a supporter and go, I'm going to be all about you right now. If you ask me for my personal experience or opinion, I'll share it, but it's going to be all on you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that again, it comes from such a lovely place, but then you actually put the other person, the onus on them to now have to ask you questions and follow up and take care of you. Another one that I think is really important is when people want to try to put a button on the situation. Like, let's solve it right here. Let's like package it up into something nice and pretty. You can't package a loss into something nice and pretty. And what I mean by that is, you know, people who will ask you, oh, well, what did they die from? And then you tell them, oh, good, at least they weren't in pain. Or, oh, what did they die from? Or how old were they? Oh, this age. Well, at least they lived a long, healthy, happy life before. They always want to try to package it up because, again, I think there's their own discomfort with grief, their own discomfort with a loss that maybe drives them to do that. Also, they care about you and they want you to hear something that they're hoping in some way will magically click and be like, ah, yes, I can take that and feel better for the rest of the day. But actually, sometimes that feels dismissive to the person.
Yes,
like, well,
it does. Right.
I'm not really, I mean, yeah, but no, right? Like, yes, that's true, but that doesn't actually make me feel better in this moment. And so, although it's hard, really your job is just to listen and to empathize and not feel like you have to solve their problem right there.
So how does a supporter see or discover if this person is dealing with a major depressive disorder or a situational depression?
I think it's asking those specific questions. Asking them, are you feeling like this every day? How many hours of a day do you feel this way? Do you feel bad? Do you still feel guilty? How long has that been going on? Do you have any thoughts about hurting yourself or killing yourself? People hate to ask that question because they want to dance around it, but you need to ask because when you ask, you get an answer. Most people will answer that question. And sometimes they're taken aback and so that's why they answer. And other times they're waiting for someone to ask them because they want the help. And so definitely ask those significant questions so that you can get the answers to help the person further.
Overall, big picture, what are some big strategies supporters can use to really help these people who are suffering?
It's really all about making sure that that person is still living their life with as much normalcy as possible. Sometimes people think that they need to take extended periods of time off. And I think that that might be helpful in the very beginning of any kind of loss. But eventually what helps you get over the loss is to reestablish a sense of normalcy in your daily routine. And as a supporter, if there's anything you can do to help foster that and encourage that, then that's going to be very helpful for the individual. Some other really big picture things are to make sure that they're still engaged in their community. So again, people will want to isolate. It's a big pull to isolate and be by yourself when you're feeling bad. But as a supporter, you go and pull them out. You do what you can, you know, even if they don't want to come out with you, maybe for dinner or coffee, then you call them, you check on them, you let them know you're going to drop by with some food. You know, those types of things can really help the individual get out of their funk. And I think another really important aspect of general coping is to lessen any stigma that they might have, any kind of feelings they might have about why am I still feeling this way? They may be beating themselves up. Why haven't I gotten over it? And just being there and saying, it's okay. There's no real timeline for this, however much time you need. And if you want to go to a grief support group or you're afraid to go by yourself, maybe I can go with you. Or if you want to look into professional counseling, maybe I can help you do some of the research and find a couple people that you can meet and talk to. I think lessening the stigma and making it feel as universal as possible is really helpful for people to not judge themselves and to actually start taking those proactive steps to heal.
How do you start to sit down with somebody and say, hey, I think you need to go see a therapist?
I think you start by telling them the observations you have of them, kind of sticking to the facts, things that you can actually see and explain, instead of like going to their internal thoughts and feelings, because you don't know that, but you can say, you know, I've noticed that you've missed a lot of work. I've noticed that you've not talked to anybody. I've noticed that some days you don't even get up out of your bed. You know, I'm worried about you. And how are you feeling about all of that? And you let them reflect on that and you say, well, how would you feel about maybe getting some professional support? And sometimes people will be really reticent to that. They don't want to do it. But I think as a loved one, you can take some of the burden off the table by saying, what if I just looked into a couple of these places and gave you like my top 2 or 3 places that I've looked at and think might be helpful. And then from those 2 or 3, you can decide which one you want to go to, or maybe I can go with you. So even just starting the process of doing that research for them and giving them your top 3 after the research can be really helpful.
And also, obviously, I'm incredibly biased towards MedCircle, but giving them resources to use by themselves at home, like watching a series like this or watching our other series on grief and bereavement, is a nice stepping stone to therapy if they perhaps need it, because they get that education, it decreases the stigma. Just having that understanding makes life so much easier.
Absolutely. The psychoeducation is so important. And again, it can break through that stigma enough for them to feel open enough to go to professional treatment.
What can a supporter do to make sure that they don't have support or burnout?
They need to take time for themselves. They need to focus on their own self-care. And so again, the first step is not feeling like you're responsible 24/7 for this person. Let go of that. And also know that you can be a better caregiver if you go away for a little bit, have your boundaries, take care of yourself, and then come back when you feel refreshed.
What about the single mom whose husband just died and now she's dealing with a kid? Don't you have to be there for that kid 24/7?
No, because you can't be a good mom and you can't do your best if you don't give yourself a timeout. So do whatever you need to get that time out. And obviously, not everybody has the same resources. Not everybody can pay for a babysitter or childcare, so they can do that. But you have family, you have friends, and try to reach out to them and say, hey, could you come over for just a couple hours? I just need to go out and go for a walk on my own, maybe go to therapy, maybe go get my nails done, like whatever it is for that person that would give them that small break that they need so they can come back feeling a little bit better about that situation.
Yep.
Again, that is triple board certified forensic and neuropsychologist Dr. Judy and our MedCircle series all on grief. MedCircle is not just a YouTube channel. MedCircle has its very own membership where members can access our library of more than 1,000 videos, take self-assessments on a variety of topics like attachment theory, attend live workshops and live office hours that are led by the same doctors you see in our videos: Dr. Judy, Dr. Ramani, Dr. Marks, Dr. Thuslam, Dr. Lamb, Dr. Dominic Spartelli, Dr. Jenny Yip. I could keep going. They are in our workshops and live office hours taking your questions. And of course, we have MedCircle courses. Our very first one is on this topic, grief and beyond bereavement. A lot of good information there on really how to support somebody else going through that grief process. And asking questions, Dr. Judy alluded to this, that people are scared to do that. They're scared to ask somebody, are you thinking about hurting yourself? And every mental health expert that I've asked about bringing up that topic has said, do it. Bring it up. If you think that, bring it up to them. I know it might be uncomfortable. I know it might be scary, but you could save their life. And I just want to reiterate that point, that if you feel that with your friend, call them, ask them. It's a good thing to do. We're going to go into an exercise. And I actually don't know what this exercise is. So this is a mystery exercise. Let's see what it is together. Take it away, Wade.
Here's a tip for practical mindfulness. For those of you guys who don't like the idea of meditation or say that mindfulness is not for you, pick an actual activity that you do every single day. Maybe it's brushing your teeth, putting your dishes away, or making your morning coffee. And just make a commitment that for those several minutes, you're only doing that activity and nothing else. Try this the next time, and I will guarantee you that you're going to get some real benefits out of these practical mindfulness moments. Here's one of my favorite activities for my morning routine. It's called 3 Things. If you're having a hard time getting out of bed, struggling with having an improved mood, or just having a hard day in general, try writing down 3 things that you're grateful for. They can be really small things, but just 3 things that you're grateful for in this moment. The bonus is to tell them to someone else, because speaking it out loud also makes it more real and really gets you to appreciate the good things that are happening in your life. This activity is called thanking your mind. Sometimes our worried warriors inside of our minds are telling us all the things that we should be fearing, all the catastrophes that might happen. And instead of blaming yourself or pushing yourself further with negative self-talk and berating yourself for having these thoughts in the first place, why not try saying, "Thank you, mind," and also a bonus, just name your mind. Actually give your mind a name. My mind's name is called Betty. So when I get too worried, when I get all stressed out about something that I maybe shouldn't have to be so bent out of shape about, I'll just say, "Thank you, Betty. I understand that you're trying to help me, but I got it from here." Try this next time, and that little bit of humor will really help you through the process.
What do you name your brain? Sound off in the comment section below. I can't use Betty because Betty's a friend of mine. She's my neighbor. We hang out 3 or 4 nights a week. Just love her. So I can't call my brain Betty. I think I'll call him Bernard. I don't know any Bernards. I'm like, Bernard, shut up. I don't want to hear that. Go back to your corner and think about what you've done. I love personifying our brain like that. And it also, as much as I'm like half joking with this, it also has you now look at your brain, and that is right next door to looking at your thoughts. And looking at your thoughts instead of being your thoughts, taking that space to go, all right, I'm having this thought. That is taken right from acceptance and commitment therapy. And if you don't know about ACT, go find a MedCircle video on ACT. Woo! It's also led by Dr. Judy. It's very powerful, very, very good. I love, love, love ACT. Okay, now we are going into our part 3 here. Thank you all for being here. So great. Thank you those who are giving this video a thumbs up. In part 3, we're going to be talking about how to find that hope and resilience after loss, and really how to build in or really build the next chapter of your life. A lot of people talk about this. Oh, well, you just have to get used to a new normal, new normal, new normal. Okay, that might be true. But your new normal doesn't even have to be normal. You get to do whatever you want. You get to do it however you want. And that is really exciting. And although you may not be feeling it right now, even allowing yourself a little bit of daydreaming about what your future could look like, what you want your future to look like, often has a lot of therapeutic benefits, in my opinion and experience. So let's all tune in together in this part 3 on really designing that next chapter in your life. It's a very exciting part of this process to realize that we're still here, we get to live, and we get to live how we want to live, however we want, whatever we can do. Even with all of our responsibilities and all of our commitments, we still get to do whatever we want. Yep. Right now, I could end this interview and go watch TV.
Yep.
I get to do whatever I want. It's a thrilling space to go back to, especially after we've been processing so much grief over the last few steps. As we reach the end of step 5, I'd like to take some time to discuss this phrase, life is for the living. Dr. Judy, what does this term mean, life is for the living?
As I've been thinking about this in preparation of us having this discussion, something keeps coming to my mind, which is I used to really love the musical Rent. I still love it. Yeah. But there's actually a song in it, and the last words of the song are "no day but today." And that's pretty much what it means to me. It means like all of us only have what's in front of us, and we oftentimes take our time here for granted. So it is really important for us just to embrace the moment that we're in and to make the most of it.
I think the implications of that are far-reaching, meaning they have quite the impact. Everything from causing us to be more grateful, intentionally adding more joy and fun to our lives. We talked about in a previous lesson, but finding that meaning and working it in with our values. It's a very exciting part of this process to realize that we're still here. We get to live, and we get to live how we want to live, however we want, whatever we can do. Even with all of our responsibilities and all of our commitments, we still get to do whatever we want. Yep. Right now, I could end this interview and go watch TV. Yep. I get to do whatever I want. It's a thrilling space to go back to, especially after we've been processing so much grief over the last few steps. Can you show us how to begin to draft out a blueprint for the next chapter of our life with this mindset of life is for the living?
I think that, for me, it's really about, what's the one thing today that you want to make sure to impart if this really is your last day on earth? Like, what is the one thing that you can do today that helps you to feel like, okay, you know what? If this was my last day, like I'm satisfied with how I lived it, right? And it doesn't mean that every day you have like the luxury of doing it exactly as if you would if you knew it was your last day.
Yeah.
You might
Sometimes
have
you got
had
to go
like,
to the DMV.
right. Yeah, exactly. You might have had a really busy day, run a bunch of chores, but it's like, okay, well, what's the button that I'm going to put on this day? Is
Yeah.
it like just telling somebody I love them? Is it just showing appreciation for someone in my life who's done something to help lift a burden? Is it committing to an activity that I know is going to be beneficial for my community and say, yes, I will show up and I will volunteer for this? What's the button that you can put on at the end of your day to say like, yeah, this was a meaningful day for me. This was a meaningful way to wrap up. I think that it's important. It is important to keep that top of mind. And I think also another more long-term strategy is this really interesting activity from acceptance and commitment therapy, which is called My Life's Epitaph. So it sounds very morbid, but essentially you're going to write down what you think your gravestone should say. A gravestone is not going to have like an entire essay. So it's literally like 1 to 2 sentences. So like, what would you like it to say? And then using that as a way to gear up towards like some long-term planning and long-term activities that you'd like to make sure that your life is infused with, because this is how you like to be remembered when you're gone.
Yes. A beautiful exercise. I believe we've done that in a workshop and it was really impactful. So I highly recommend you trying that out. In addition to reviewing your life, so to speak, this is also a great time to start setting those goals on what you want your next chapter to be like. And there's 5 steps here that we follow at MedCircle for goal setting. Check these out. The first step is to just list what the goals are, the final end goal. What is it? The second step, and what I believe to be the most important step, is what is your intention behind each goal? List that out next to your goal. Then the third step is to create a series of steps. I like to make them baby steps or micro movements, as we discussed in a previous lesson. And we want to put a deadline to accomplish each step. Be kind to yourself with the deadline. We don't have to accomplish everything this week. Give yourself time to work, to move at a pace that's acceptable to you. Then list any tools or people or resources that you can rely on while you are achieving these goals. And then the final step is just identify which goal you're going to start with first and get going. This is very exciting. For your journal reflection or homework, I would love for you to journal on any type of goal setting, future thinking, daydreaming that you have. Get excited, let your mind wander, let it go to the even far-reaching places of your imagination. Just see what you're able and capable of dreaming up. And then pick some goal that you're excited about and share it with the community. We've done this in the past, but now we're taking a more critical approach. We're really going to start achieving these goals together. So take some time. This can be a day, a week, an hour. You know best. Take some time, decide what that goal is, share it in the community, and then we'll see you in our final step of the course.
I experienced, the biggest tragedy of my life when I lost my brother to suicide in 2009. And I was a psychologist at the time. I was working in mental health. So as you can imagine, the shock, right, and the immense difficulty that I experienced and my family experienced having to deal with this unexpected loss. And for anyone who's dealt with this before, I think there's a certain kind of like, you don't want to be part of this brotherhood or sisterhood, but you are,
Yeah.
and you know that people don't really understand if they haven't been through it before. And so for me, this experience was a branching point in my life where I was not the same afterward. And it took me a long time, a lot longer than I expected, to find a degree of normalcy again. And so I think this experience for me is one of those moments that I was just never the same. And this is why I think this topic is so important, because I also think it's about hearing from other people how they find their way through these moments in life, whether it's something like what I experienced or something different. We all experience times in life where we get a curveball, where we thought things were going to go one way and they didn't. And so, yeah, that's kind of how I personally have felt this.
What do you think the purpose is for us to go through these major life events? And you can say, I don't know if there is a purpose. Sometimes just sucky things happen. That's a completely appropriate answer.
Well, life events are inevitable. They're part of the human experience. They cause suffering in many ways, but they're also really beautiful experiences. They, have you watched the movie Inside Out?
That's a cartoon or an animated thing? I haven't watched it. No, yeah.
You must watch it. It is so good.
Hey, I trust you. You have given me some good recommendations, and I don't typically watch animated stuff, but I'll watch it if you're saying watch it.
Yeah, it is such a good movie because it really illustrates the complexities of our emotional life, even through an animation. Because I think a lot of us would like to simplify and boil things down to, I want as many positive emotions as possible and as little negative emotions as possible. That sounds like a good goal. Like, why not, right? But the most beautiful moments of life are a mixture of many feelings. There are feelings of grief and regret and joy. There are, feelings of apprehension and nervousness, but also excitement, right? And that really is why life events are so important, because if you look at any major life event, it's not one pure emotion. It's not just pure depression. It's not just pure anxiety. It's a lot of different things. And some of them have a positive valence and some of them have a negative valence. But going through these more complex emotions helps you to grow as a human being. It helps you to be more compassionate, more resilient. And also it's what everybody has to go through. I mean, if there's any universality to the human experience, it's major life events.
Yeah.
So that's something that we share no matter what part of the world you're from, who you've spoken to, who you have relationships with. We all go through some things that are just inevitable for everyone. And, one of the most common experiences, of course, is grief of losing something, whether it's your identity, a person, important person in your life, to death or something else. Like, we are all going to go through that at some point in our lives. And so, one of the ways in which, when we're thinking about things like grief, disappointment, other major life events, is knowing that radical acceptance doesn't mean that you agree with what's happening.
Okay.
It's actually just about not fighting against what's happening. And so it's really just this idea of saying, even that you accept your emotions, again, without judging them. Like, okay, I'm mad right now. I'm in denial. And it's okay for them to be what they are right now. That's an okay emotion, The fighting against the emotions is what gets us into a bad place. Well, why do I feel this way? Why can't I do better? That's when it is more difficult. And so I think ways to practice acceptance, and radical acceptance especially, is really trying to focus on seeing the experiences, the negative thoughts, the negative feelings as waves in the ocean, right? They just kind of come and go. There's some unpredictability to them, yet there's a rhythm, but there's kind of an unpredictability. You don't know when you're going to have a big wave or a small wave, right? But really just allowing those waves to come, because you don't have control over the waves in the ocean. So really kind of seeing your own personal interpretations that way can be one important step towards practicing radical acceptance.
I think there's this expectation among ourselves that as soon as X amount of time has passed, I should be over this. As soon as I get into a next relationship, I should get over my past one. As soon as blah, 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 blah. Well, no. There's no as soon as. There's no timeline here. The freedom, the permission for us to have this new life is really freeing for me, Dr. Judy, at least.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that that's such an important thing to think about as a takeaway. I think a lot of people feel burdened by their grief, tied down by their grief. I also think that there are people who feel like there's something wrong if they're not grieving more, so they feel guilty, and therefore they like try to keep themselves into this specific negative mind state because they feel like that's what you do to honor the person that you lost. But I think your discussion just now about that sense of freedom is so powerful, because there should be the freedom to live your life and experience life to its fullest, and yet still also know that you honor the person that passed and that you love that person. And just because you're happy every day doesn't mean that you don't miss them or don't love them. That's not an indication that they're not being honored. And I would say that if that person is speaking to you, they might say, no, honor me by living your life. Like, please, like, I would love for you to live your life more fully. And also for people who believe in the spiritual realm and like a life beyond, it's like, you know, I can imagine the loved one saying, no, I want to hear more about your adventures when we finally meet up again. You know, like, I don't want to hear that for the last 20 years of your life, you've been doing nothing. So this is a really powerful technique for processing grief and loss. And this is called the empty chair technique. So some of you guys may have heard about it. It's part of the Gestalt module of therapy, although it also originated from a specific form of Gestalt called psychodrama. Here's what we're going to do, Kyle. I'm going to ask you to think a little bit about a person that you lost. And it can be anybody, whoever maybe today as we're sitting here, you're thinking the most about, or someone who is most on your mind. So who might that be?
Oh, my mother. That's easy. Yeah, she died when I was 16 years old.
So what I want you to do is I want you to move over and sit in the empty chair, because I want to meet your mom. So
Great.
yeah. Great. And so everyone who's watching, go ahead and move over to the empty chair that you have prepared also. And so Kyle, I want to meet your mom. Your mom, what is her first name?
Janice, can you hear me over there?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Yes. So Janice. All right. So I want to meet Janice. And the best way to do that is to talk to her. So I want you to be Janice. Okay.
Okay, well, I got to sit up straight then because she had perfect posture.
Exactly. I want you to sit in that chair the way that Janice sits in a chair.
Okay.
I want you to capture the way that Janice answers questions, try to get into her head and how she thinks. I basically want you to be Janice in every way that you can. You know Janice better than anyone, so I know you can do that, okay?
Okay.
Okay. So, hi, Janice. Thank you so much for being here. Can you tell me a little bit? Can you tell me a little bit about how old you were when you died?
Oh goodness. Well, I was in my 40s, in my late 40s. I don't actually remember. Mm-hmm. And I had 2 kids and a husband, and I certainly had no intention of dying at 40. We'll call it 47, but life happened that way, and that's what happened.
Thank you for sharing that. And tell me, how did you die?
Well, I died of cancer, colon cancer. I battled it for many years. I tried every treatment they had available. Of course, I did chemo. I tried other treatments that were more, I can't remember the word, but they were, experimental, so to speak. And I really tried everything I could.
Janice, what did you love most about Kyle?
Well, we just got along so well, it's she would probably say that she liked that we were, or I'm supposed to be her. We had the exact same sense of humor. It's like having a little version of you running around. You know, it's like watching yourself, and you go, God, look at me go over there, and look at me go to middle school, and then look at me go to high school, and look at me do this, and then we have so many of similar interests. Because I was a piano player I was a professional piano player, and Kyle did a lot of theater and drama, and so we saw a lot of shows. And you know, it makes it sound like it kind of sounds egotistical, but it's just seeing yourself. It's just like that. To me, it's two of the same people.
So now I would like you to reverse roles and be Kyle. So Kyle, can you come back to your chair, please? And if it's possible, to look at the chair where your mom is sitting now, where Janice is sitting.
Okay.
So Kyle, I know that many thoughts have crossed your mind during all of the days that have gone by since your mom passed away. But she is here now. So what do you want her to know? Tell her what you want to say to her today.
Well, the reason I'm hesitating is because I told her all this in the hospital. And I haven't really.
And you can talk to her directly. You can talk to her directly.
Oh, well, I was telling you, Dr. Judy, I don't know if I want to share exactly what we said in the hospital to each other.
Yes, you don't have to do that.
But I would say that I don't see how anyone could have been a better human being in their whole life. I don't see how anybody could have been a better human being than that person.
This is a really powerful exercise for many, many people. And I just appreciate all of the vulnerability that you shared and just really getting into it. And so Kyle, what did you learn from that exercise? I know sometimes it was hard, like you would like try to say, well, she would say, and then you would have to like try to get yourself back. Okay, wait, I am Janice. Let me see what that would be like. But what did you learn from that exercise?
Okay, well, here we go. So the first thing I've learned, and it's not so much a learning as it is a reminder, is that this is still such an emotional topic for me. But I will say, not always, Dr. Judy. There have been, how many times I've talked about my mom on MedCircle? A lot. It comes up a lot. We talk about our childhood and significant events in our life on this platform a lot, so it comes up. And I don't burst into tears every time. Not that there's anything wrong with bursting into tears. I'm saying that sometimes I just have the emotional and mental fortitude to discuss it without crying, or discuss it in a way that's coming more logically than emotionally. But there are times like today where who knows why, the emotions, all of that was emotionally led. You know, in a lot of conversations, I would think very analytically, cognitively about the question and the event and the relationship. And in this activity, it was all emotion based. And I think because now that I'm talking out loud, I'm kind of getting another wave of insight, is that for me to pose as my dead mother and speak as her logically makes no sense to Kyle. Kyle's brain goes, what are you talking about? This person is not here. And because it's so logically off the chart, the only thing left is emotions. So now I'm just sitting in my emotions because there's no logical way for me to justify this, which is good for me because I do struggle with showing my emotions, although you probably wouldn't have noticed. And I know that after we wrap this workshop, I'll feel better. Today, I will move through the day with a more lightness than I otherwise would, not because I walk around harboring anything, at least not consciously, but because you feel better after you get this stuff out. You know, you just feel better. Like sometimes I think me and a lot of the viewers will agree to this. Don't sometimes you just go, I'm going to watch that movie so I can cry? Or like, I'm going to get in my car and put on this song because I'm emotional right now. And so there is therapeutic advantages I find to lean into all of those emotions. And that was very uncomfortable. And part of the reason it was uncomfortable is because it was on camera. And I will admit to that. If I was in a therapist's office, you know, one-on-one, I think I might be a little more open. Not that I'm not being honest. I'm just not.
Yeah.
Anytime the camera's on, you just go, well, people are watching this, you know, that comes into play a little bit for me, at least.
And I think an important point too is that, you know, in Diane's case, there was a tragedy that was a catalyst for you, right? I mean, this tragedy. And when we look at resilience, it can go very different ways for people. Now, unfortunately, in my job as a psychiatrist in the hospitals, on the inpatient units, in the emergency room, I do see it go the other way. I see people that experience tragedy and trauma, and they don't recover from it. They become incredibly depressed, even suicidal themselves, and they fall out of the community and they become isolated and very ill, right? So it can go the other way. What we see is that people that are resilient can adopt an orientation of tragedy, loss as an opportunity.
Wow.
They can see that.
Wow.
Now, I'm not saying they see that immediately because tragedy and loss is horrifying and it's so tremendously difficult to deal with immediately. But resilient people can sort of see past that a little bit and say, this is an opportunity for
That's
some change.
you, right?
And we
Yeah,
have
I
that
definitely
person sitting
think,
right here, I think.
Yeah, I think my foundation is exactly that, is that it's also hard to look at tragedy as being opportunist,
Of
right?
course,
Because then
of
you
course,
think
of course.
about it as, are you benefiting from? So you have to be very careful, and that's where I think you can go the other way. Sometimes when I speak to the schools and I go in, I absorb all that and I re-traumatize myself as I tell Mallory's story, but then I have to remember, but I also think it goes back to your own inner voice that you have to tell yourself why you're doing this, what's the end game, you know, what is your ultimate goal? Is your ultimate goal to live in that tragic moment, or is your ultimate goal to really help people? It's just like with the homeless. Are you helping the homeless or are you helping them because you know that they need a night's sleep? Like you have to kind of look at it from that side.
Let's dive into that moment a little bit, where the traumatic event has occurred. And certainly there's a mourning period, and we'll talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and whatnot later. But at some point, you're right. No matter how severe the tragedy, you have to ask yourself that question. Do I live here in this tragedy, or do I live a life
that's meaningful.
This? That's
meaningful.
Yeah.
What's your legacy going to be? Like, how are you going to be defined? And remember this, bad things happen to good people every single day. It's not about what happens to us. It's what we do after that is our ultimately defining moment in that tragedy. And so, you know, I heard a mother once say she had lost 3 children. She had 4, and she had lost 3 to a genetic disorder. And she said something, I know, right? And I thought, well, what do I have to be sad about? I lost 1. She lost 3 before the age of 10. But she said something that was so profound. Those who lose the most do the most. And I think that was that kind of like my aha moment, is that yes, this happened to your family. It didn't just happen to you, it happened to your family. But it also, when tragedy strikes, it happens to a community. What I saw, and the reason why I was able to become this overcoming individual, was I didn't just lose Mallory, Seth didn't just lose Mallory, our family didn't, the community lost Mallory. And so in order to help the community heal from their their loss, I had to show them that together we could overcome Mallory's loss, and what could we do better. Like, take the examples of what happens, right? We're a society that puts up a stop sign after someone dies at the intersection. We're very reactive. So I needed to send a message to the community that how are we going to react to Mallory's death? And that's where our advocacy comes from.
Yeah.
I think that to answer what your question from my perspective is sometimes it's small behaviors every day that get you to your end goal. I didn't wake up one day and decide that I wanted to advocate for cyberbullying or bullying or behavior. I think sometimes when you're in that storm, just getting up and taking a shower that day that's step one.
Huge win.
Right? You have to, I think
victories.
that sometimes when we're in this grief and we're inside that storm, then our only goal is, right, to get out of the storm. But sometimes it's just behaving your way in baby steps to get you out of that storm. For someone that's grieving, they might just, so when they're thinking about, like, that sounds really great, but how am I going to do it? You have to set it out and set small goals for yourself. So it might be just getting a shower that day. And for me, sometimes it's just putting a little bit of makeup on and so that I can feel normal. And then sometimes it could be just going and speaking to someone or doing a Facebook, post or something along those lines. So I think to try to tackle the entire storm in one setting that is the impossible that your viewers would be. But if you can teach them to behave to the way that you want to ultimately be, it could just be small behaviors every day. It could be just getting outside, getting some fresh air, and going for a nice long walk. It's not going to solve your problem. It's not going to remove the pain. But in that moment, in that 15 to 20 minutes that you're walking, you actually might feel okay.
But being present and mindful is the apex of healing for me. I mean, when you can really just be in the moment. And you're both telling me that when you guys give back and are altruistic, that's when you are most in the moment.
Can I tell you how difficult it is to be grateful? You know what I mean? Like, I have to sometimes wrap my head around that I am probably living my best life. And imagine how grateful I would be if Mallory was here. But to be grateful to be in this journey, that is a true inner conversation that you have to have with yourself to be able to be grateful for the journey that you have right now, but at what cost?
How do you do that?
It's deliberate.
It's deliberate.
You deliberately have to do it. Like, it would be so much easier for me to lay in the bed and it's about behaving. Again, I go back to the behaviors. Behaving my way, my actions are deliberate. I make sure that I am mindful and that I have this healthy conversation with myself. And sometimes, a sad song will come on the radio and it throws me right back to the tragedy, and I have to go, okay, you're not there right now. You have to have it. And sometimes you have to talk to yourself out loud. And if you see me in the car, you're going to see that.
Can sometimes I just cry, though, in the car and just slam my fist down?
Can I tell you something?
Yes, you can.
Emotions are great ways to behave your way to the life that you want, right? Emotions are a part of healing. Emotions are a part of the behavior to live the life. I just can't stand when we tell people don't cry and suck it up and all of that. No, it's okay. I cry every day over Mallory. Every single day I cry. And that reminds me that I'm human and that I was her mother and that I lost her. But I can also be grateful. I always say that sadness has to stay in its lane. Right? Sadness is always present. I think that we have to have a healthy relationship with sadness stays in its lane. And every once in a while it wants to T-bone us. Right in the side. But I have to have a conversation, not now, sadness. I will pay attention to you later. But right now, you have to stay in your lane. And so as I'm going through my journey of life, I have a conversation with the emotions that are getting ready to interrupt the journey that I'm on. And so if it's a positive journey, and then I have to be mindful to acknowledge the sadness and let it come in, because if you constantly suppress it, that's not healthy either. So I have to let the sadness come in, but make sure that it's always there.
There are people out there who I think really want to advocate, but they hesitate sometimes because they feel they should be an advocate within the realm that could relate to their trauma. So if they were, for example, sexually abused, they want to help others through that, but it's too close to their trauma, and so they hesitate. So I want this conversation now to really focus to those people and let them know that that is okay, correct, Dr. Dom?
Absolutely.
And that they can do it in a different way if needed.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, there are certain people that have had such significant trauma that if they advocate in that realm or in that space, they're going to relive the trauma in a negative way.
Right.
And they can't face that. And that's okay, right? So, yeah, we have to be careful. I don't want someone to beat themselves up or to judge themselves or be self-critical to say, I can't help people that have gone through what I go through because I can't relive that every day.
Right.
That's okay. There are plenty of ways to help.
Right.
There are plenty of ways to give. There are plenty of talents that we have that we can offer people.
I think there are organizations that are directly related to causes but are not necessarily the cause. So I think that you can get involved in those things. I think it's about stepping back and taking your own temperature about what it is, what you can handle, and being able to decide. So you may not be able to get involved in the legislative process if you want to change the laws, but you can often send an email to your legislators to let them know that your community is passionate about this. I also think that we talked about this earlier, we don't have to necessarily take a selfie of ourselves doing that. Sometimes we can just do it because we're doing it, and we can take the light the light off of us.
Yeah. Have you found over the last few years limits for you where you go, you know what, I can't do that. I'm not ready for that yet.
Yeah, I think that there are times that I'm asked to do things that I have to go back to my family and I have to ask them, would this make you uncomfortable if I talked about this? You know, my advocacy is not just about us. I'm exposing our entire family when you're doing that. So I think, and again, that would go back to someone who was maybe sexually abused. You have to go back and ask the people that are in your life, if I do this, will it impact you? When we did our film and we were doing things, we were very careful not to put Carly in the limelight because that's not fair to her. She's still a child. So I make sure that when I'm doing things that I'm checking with my family and making sure that we're all comfortable, we're all on the same page.
Hi everybody, thanks so much for joining us for this series. I think it's going to be a really impactful series for you. Grief and loss is something that is universal to all of us, and I have had several different important and very poignant grief and loss experiences in my own life. But the first one that I always think about when I think about grief and loss is the loss of my maternal grandmother. She was one who raised me. My parents were really busy trying to make ends meet. They were each working 2 to 3 jobs throughout the first few years of my childhood. So I spent the most time with my grandmother, and we had just this crazy, unshakable bond. She just was somebody who I have so many wonderful memories of from my childhood and beyond. And when I learned that she had a cancer diagnosis, I really kind of was in denial for a lot of it. I really remembered myself having a difficult time with that, kind of just not acknowledging that that could even be happening. And then when I had learned that it had metastasized to various parts of her body and that her prognosis was really poor, again, I think I was really in denial that she would just be with us for a really long time. I think I was in denial for a very, very long time. Eventually, I was able to make it back overseas and see her, and I had a beautiful 2 weeks with her in her last days. And I really felt like she hung in there for that last trip that I got to spend with her. I sang with her, I read stories to her, I just kind of laid there next to her, and it was just a beautiful time for us to be together. When I came back, very quickly she decompensated, and I really think that there is something to this idea that sometimes our loved ones hold on to these last visits with us, and then once they've had that, they're at peace, they're ready to go. So a few days after I left, she started decompensating, she went into the hospital, and then she never came back out. So she actually ended up passing away on New Year's Day. And I remember this was a very, very difficult time for me. And for a long time, I felt like I wasn't safe in the world anymore. I never felt that way before when she was alive, even though we were divided by many, many, many hours of plane flight because she was living in Taiwan and I was living in America. I just always felt like things were going to be fine and everything was going to work out. And I think that that is credited so much to just my bond with her, my strong attachment bond. And once she left this earth, I really felt like I wasn't safe anymore. I kind of felt like, well, bad things could happen and bad things happen all the time to good people. And so I really struggled with some of my own existential crises. and started to have so much stress and worry about other members of my family dying and how much time I would have with people. And I think those struggles were with me for a really long time, probably for the better part of a year. But slowly and surely, I think certain things just kind of started to make sense to me. I still revisit so many of the beautiful memories that we have. I've had so many different dreams of my grandmother, and the dreams that I have of her are when she's doing well and she's thriving, and we're just doing everyday activities like cooking together, hanging out. It's nothing really special to what we're doing except that we're together. And so I realized that she's always going to be with me, and that essentially, I'm never really gonna lose her, you know. I'm always gonna remember her through my memories, my stories of her, remembering her in the ways that are the most special to me. And so while I still feel her loss every single day, and some days are still more difficult than others because I'll have certain reminders of my time with her, either a situation or even just a thought or a memory that I have will spark that sadness again that she's no longer here on this earth. I do feel like I'm in a much better place in terms of processing it, understanding it, and ultimately knowing that our loved ones never leave us, and being able to share that experience with other people who have been through painful losses. So if any of this resonated with you, just know that I'm with you, I've been there, and I will help you through this process.
Wonderful insight from not only Dr. Judy, our triple board certified forensic and neuropsychologist, but Dr. Dom, Diane Grossman, and maybe even I added some value there for you. I hope so. That was a snippet, or those were snippets from our live workshops, our educational series, and our courses, all available to our members at MedCircle.com. If you're not a member, you can sign up today at MedCircle.com. Or if you're just interested in the course, hit the link in the description of this video. Shout out to all the people in the live chat. A lot of you, many of you are sharing stories about your loss, and I hope that you are finding peace and resilience when and where you need it. I also want to say thank you to all of the doctors who make this content possible, and the millions of people who subscribe or watch MedCircle every month. We can't do any of this without your support. Thank you for being here. I'm Kyle Kittleson. Remember, whatever you're going through, you got this.